Good morning. Sorry I'm a little late here a lot late this morning. Running a little slow after Easter, as you can imagine. But we're here and we're ready to go. Today we're going to look at Proverbs, and if we have time, we'll take a little piece of Second Corinthians as well, but we'll start with Proverbs today. We are in chapter 11 of Proverbs, and we are looking at verses 12 through 18 today. Not particularly stitched together in a really strong way, but they'll share some ideas. So we can take a look at that. Let me get open my Hebrew here. I like to read the Proverbs and the Psalms because sometimes the word sounds can matter. Sometimes the poetry will not only have like a structure to it, but also there might be some rhyming structure, or at least maybe either alliteration or consecutive words sometimes rhyme. So we just like to sound it out just to make sure we're not missing any fun stuff. So we're going to start off with verse 12. Baz, la re'eu, hasar, lev, yaish, I think. Veish, sorry. Veish, to tebunot, Yaharis. Baz despises his neighbor, he who is lacking. Okay, so the Hebrew is going to put, it's interesting, the proverb does this again. Yeah. Okay, so the sentence is, I'm going to draw it out so you can kind of see it. It's interesting. The word order of the Hebrew puts bookends. Oh no, sorry. So we have on either end of the verse, I should have to be clear too, right? We have despises, and then on the other end of the verse, at the end, so this is the first word, this is the last word. So we have despises and then holds his peace as the first and last word, respectively. Okay, so we would probably take in English, the subject is actually 3 words into the Hebrew sentence, he who is lacking. And they could do that. The word order can be fairly loose in Hebrew in terms of like where the subject and the object and things like that are in the sentence. So that is no problem in Hebrew, but we'll need to move it around for it to make more sense in English. But literally, or very woodenly, it would be despises his neighbor who is lacking. Despises his neighbor, he who is lacking, or the lacking one, right? So we would translate it, the lacking one, or he who is lacking despises his neighbor. And the assumption here would be that his neighbor is perhaps doing better than he. But, it's funny. I don't know. I mean, perhaps the text is suggesting that, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be that way. I think sometimes we can see, like maybe I've had situations I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, if you would like to text in any way or to be involved in the Bible study, you can text my phone number, which you should have. I won't say it out loud here on the video. That would be unwise. But if you have my phone number, you can text me and I'll get it right. I got my phone right here, so I see those. You can write in the comments of the YouTube. If you're watching on a computer, it's a little easier than on the TV. The TV might be easier to text. You can send me an email, or you can message even the Facebook link if you got here that way. Okay, so I'll have all of those things open, and you can reach out to me anyway. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm on the right page. There we go. Got it. Okay. So I've got the Facebook page open as well. If you message on that or message me on Facebook, either way, I'll get those comments. So if you want to comment or if you have a question, things like that, you can go ahead. Getting back to the text here, he who is lacking is a lacking one, or he who is lacking despises his neighbor. I think this is everything to do with the 9th and 10th commandment, coveting. Very often we look at our neighbor and we want what they have, right? And very often we forget that what we actually have. I have a wonderful member of the congregation who is elderly. She is very well taken care of, but because of health issues and family issues, she is very sad right now, right? So, I mean, you might look at her and say, "Oh, she's got all the money she wants, she's taken care of," and she would probably look at you and say, "Well, you're not sick and there's not problems in your family, so I would actually rather have." You see how we can always want something else? We can always kind of assume that because someone else's situation is something that's opposite of ours or different from ours, we assume that it's better. It may not be, right? So I think, it wouldn't necessarily have to be that the man, so like you're looking at your neighbor. I don't think we have to assume that the neighbor is actually doing better. Perhaps the neighbor just has different things, and the person wants that instead. So, we have an interesting thing going on here. Then, so the second part of the sentence, but a man of wisdom. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta, let's look at the translation here real quick. I think I might have made a mistake here. Yeah, okay. So the wisdom goes with the first part of the sentence. So the one who is lacking, it's not a lacking in terms of an earthly lacking, it's lacking of wisdom. The man who is lacking wisdom despises his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his peace. Now, I'm really curious about, we've had the majority of these words before, but I don't know if we've ever had Yaharis. So I'd like to look at that one, this idea of holding your peace. Comes from karash, which is all together. It is to cut in, to engrave, to plow, to devise. Genesis 24:21 was gazing at her in silence to know. Jacob held his peace until they came. So it seems like this is a fairly regular translation of this word, the idea of, yeah, okay, as a verb, to be silent, to be dumb, to be speechless. That's interesting. Primitive root, to scratch, i.e., by implication, to engrave, to plow. To fabricate, figuratively, to devise. Hence, from the idea of secrecy, to be silent, to let alone. So it takes on these ideas that, maybe I get the sense that it's like talking about engraving and plowing or fabricating, like maybe like someone's poring over a piece of stone and preparing to carve, and they're making a plan in their heads, right? So they're looking at it intensely, right? This idea of being silent and kind of just looking at it or taking in information. So a man of wisdom holds his peace. I wonder if there's a note on this one. This is an interesting one. Okay, 11:12. Remain silent. Yeah. Merciful silence concerning the faults and sins of one's neighbor fulfills the 8th commandment. So yeah, so like when Luther would say things like that your ears should be a grave, when you hear things. So we talk about the 8th commandment in this respect, and sometimes you may know things. Just because you know things doesn't mean that you're supposed, like, and you may know things that are wrong. You might know instances where perhaps someone has done something against God's law, and in an effort to protect a man's character, it seems like you would, I don't know, this seems like, what would be, so in other words, what would be the kind of thing that your neighbor does that drives you crazy? Like these kinds of things. I don't think this is getting at, I mean, I could be guessing, but it doesn't seem like this is talking about things like crimes, murder, right? But rather just bad behaviors, things like this. So in other words, you overlook things, you let your ears be a grave. You don't necessarily, I hate to say this, but sometimes as a pastor, I pretend often like I don't know about things. And in other words, just because I see something on Facebook, I'm not going to necessarily believe it until the person tells me in person. Maybe that's the wrong way to go about it, but sometimes if it wasn't an effective communication tool for all of you, I would be off of it because it causes more consternation and trouble in my life than it's worth. So, let someone come to me and tell me what's going on in their life as opposed to using information that maybe I've observed and coming to someone maybe in the wrong way or talking to other people about it, right? So a man of wisdom holds his peace. He's silent. He isn't interested in spreading around gossip or it could be the truth too, like spreading around the truth, but a truth, some truths maybe are meant to be kept, not necessarily meant to be shared. And so they're completely right, they're completely true, correct, all those things, but they're not meant to be public, right? So a man of peace and understanding, a man of wisdom and understanding would be silent, would hold his peace. I can't help but think of, since we just came out of Easter too, isn't this interesting how it applies to Christ? In terms of, think of all the things that he could have said, just about the things that he observed as a human, right? Like, so just the things, in other words, the things that the Pharisees had done that was wrong, the things the Pharisees had said to him that were poor or bad, right? I mean, there's 1,000 things he could have talked about in that respect. But also, if he wanted to, he could have started revealing things to Pilate that he shouldn't know, because he would know them because he's God. He could have revealed to Pilate all sorts of things, and Pilate would have been, he's already a little nervous about the whole situation. They call him God. He said that he was God, and Pilate's like, oh, what if this guy is God? I don't want to be guilty of killing this God. And of course, for a Roman, probably not as scary as it would be for a Jew, right? Because there are lots of gods in their system, so it maybe not as scary, but still scary. Jesus could have told Pilate all sorts of things. Instead, he chooses to hold his peace. He remained silent except for a couple instances. And those couple instances they seem to be trying to teach Pilate, not necessarily get out of the situation, but express to Pilate what the real situation is. Maybe Christ is concerned about Pilate's eternal life. Who knows? But he holds his peace. A man, so that would, I think, definitely be reading it out of context. I think in the context, he's just talking about, neighbor to neighbor relationships and how we get along with one another, how we operate in the world we live in now. So I'm definitely reading that out of context. Like, a man of wisdom and understanding, Christ, he held his tongue. He remained silent. But it's interesting nonetheless. Verse 13. Holek Rakil Megale Sod, Vena Eman, Ru'ah Mekase Dabar. So my guess is it's a talebearer. So I'm guessing like something like a teller of tales is how it's translated. A talebearer of talebearers. So this not be a very good translation. Let's look up Holek first. Holek is halak, to come, to go, to walk. There's got to be another translation here besides walk. Hithpael. It's pretty consistent. The meaning here. Okay. To walk, to come, to behave, be conversant. Well, there's this be conversant. I don't know if that's where they're getting this idea of like a storyteller or tale teller, right? Okay. Or it could be like just a simple understanding of one who goes on, right? That might be is okay. So, yeah. So that now one of the thing of here is talebearer, but it's also slander. So like one who continually tells slander, right? One who slanders. How's it translated here in the ESV? Whoever goes about slandering. Yeah, it's about the same thing. Okay. So yeah, because you have a participle here and then a noun. So like the noun is second in the sentence, but we probably put that first. So a slanderer who goes on revealing secrets, or a slanderer continually reveals secrets, something like that. Slander, and then for let's look up because all this stuff gets difficult in the world we live in now because of Facebook and social media, Twitter, and everything else. The definition of slander versus libel. Okay, so slander. Let's look that word up. Okay. Okay. The action of or crime of making a false spoken statement damaging to a person's reputation. Okay. So this looks like oral statements, I think libel, the difference with libel is written. Let's look that up real quick. A published false statement. Yeah, so something that's written down. So libel versus slander. Slander is saying false things. Libel is writing false things. Okay. Now, so slander would be saying false things about someone. Whoever goes about revealing, slandering, reveals secrets. The thing that's strange here is that, if you're slandering, you're telling lies. But secrets would imply that the thing is true, right? And of course, I don't have any note on that. Yeah, I don't have anything on the first part of that. I really need to get a good Proverbs commentary. So well, looking at the second part of the verse then, right? So we have this, a slander reveals secrets, but he who is faithful, or who has a faithful spirit, conceals a matter, conceals a thing, right? The ESV translates it, but he who is trustworthy in spirit, who is faithful in spirit, trustworthy in spirit, keeps a thing covered, conceals a thing, right? Keeps it covered. So maybe the verse is, it seems like it's still talking about like eighth commandment stuff, right? And a faithful one, like there's a matter that's going on between, perhaps there's a problem in someone else's household, right? Like mother and father, husband and wife are having marital difficulties. Now, just because they're having marital difficulties does not mean they're going to get divorced or the case, but the person who knows these things is revealing things that should stay within the house, right? Stay with the household. So maybe the first part of 13 is assuming that someone who slanders will also reveal secrets. I think that's a fair assessment. Like I could see that, where someone who goes about slandering, these are not people you give secrets to, because they'll reveal them as well, right? That makes sense. And then just to drill down this just for a second, I found myself falling into this trap too. Like one of my worst things is grousing. Like there are people who don't care for me, and I'm usually pretty perceptive. I know it. And so complaining about that, or just being irritated by it I have probably a bad need to be liked, and when people don't like me, it bothers me, and then there's something satisfying about grousing about those situations, those people, right? So when you have this desire to grouse about these things, to complain about them, to be angry about them, right, you're going to gravitate towards people who will kind of give you that same level of energy back. The last thing, when you want to grouse about stuff, the last person you want to talk about is someone who's going to say, I don't know if we should be talking about this. This doesn't seem in keeping with the eighth commandment, right? So you're going to shy away from those folks. So you kind of almost go out and look for someone who's going to give you back that same level of anger, energy, whatever you need. Here's the thing, though. If you find someone who's willing to give you back that level of energy, how can you trust what they're saying when you're not around? These are not friends you want, right? If someone's willing to dish about somebody else to you, then how can you be sure they're not going to dish about you when you're not around? Right? So if you find someone in your life who is more than willing to kind of complain and grouse about people and complain and or uh, break the eighth commandment, even slander them, right, or lie about them, and you might get some enjoyment out of that for a time, but that thing's going to come back around, right? It might be fun while you're grousing, while you're complaining about somebody else, but then now that you've done this with that person, how can you be sure that they're not going to take all of your words and blow them around town, right? Amongst everyone else who you're, the best thing is for your ears and your life to be a grave for everybody involved, including yourself, because that stuff's going to come back at you. It always does. Um, so yeah, why would you trust someone who is already a liar with secrets? They're not going to keep them secret, right? But a faithful person, right, who has a faithful spirit, it conceal it. They'll keep it a secret, something that and then of course, a faithful person who's got wisdom, they're going to know when the right time is to reveal things. Like there is a time and place to reveal secrets. Some secrets should not be kept, right? Like, and I don't mean to pick on Roman Catholics, but like the idea that we kept this priest issue a secret, that was the wrong thing, right? And there are plenty of other, I don't mean to single them out, there are plenty of other examples. The point is that there are some secrets that shouldn't be kept, but a faithful person probably has enough common sense and wisdom given from the scriptures to understand which one is which, right? Some things should be kept, should be concealed. Other things should be put to the light of day. And really, I mean, there's a place where we could say that no Christian person should be keeping something that's wrong a secret. But there's a difference between someone coming to their pastor or coming to their congregation and confessing their sin, and then someone being blown up in front of the pastor or in front of the congregation and being forced to confess their sins, right? Those are two different things. And the latter is the better situation, because the person's going to come to it of their own accord. They're going to repent of their sins and they're going to be eager to hear the gospel, right? But if you roast someone on a spit, they might push away from the gospel, and that's the last thing anybody wants. So, verse 14. These are kind of interesting, aren't they? They're like, at first glance they might seem not all that important, but then you dig into it, like they really kind of hit regular life for Christian people. So they're deep. Okay. Be'en tabulot yipal am utesua berab yaos. Or let's see here. I think it's actually Yo-S. Yeah, Yo-S, I believe. There's only two vowels there as far as I can tell. When there is no counsel, the people fall. But there is safety in the multitude of counselors. ESV goes, when there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. Okay. It makes me think about Moses when his father Jethro suggested him, like, Moses is being run ragged. He's dealing with all the court cases. He's dealing with all the proclamation and preaching. They're dealing with a lot of the goings on in the temple. He's the voice for God. He's going out to the tent of meeting with regularity and communicating God's word. So Moses has got a ton of stuff to do, and he's being kind of run ragged. And Jethro suggests that he should have helpers, right? He's like, you're doing way too much. You should entrust some of these duties, delegation, right? And so then they delegate to the 72 ministers, and then from this point on, they seem to have leadership. And it sounds like it's kind of like the whole apostles appointing people to take care of widows and bread at tables. If you remember this in the book of Acts, we'll actually get into it in the scripture readings in church here shortly, where the apostles appoint other people to do kind of the day-to-day work so the apostles can focus on just being apostles, right? That's kind of what it seems like the 72 are doing. These guys are prophesying, which is important, but they're also dealing with civil matters and kind of basically being a system of jurisprudence to the people of Israel. They're holding court and dealing with civil stuff, and which is probably important because you're going to have little skirmishes and stuff within a people that big. Then it takes that kind of minutia stuff off Moses's plate so he can focus on other things. So a land where you have more than one leader or you have leadership in general. And then don't forget too that it's very clear in the Old Testament that God intends every father to be leading his household. So not only you got like 72 leaders, you have Moses, you have Aaron, you have the priesthood, you have the Levites, then you've got these 72 leaders. I mean, you've got a ton of leadership. And then on top of that, you've got every father being a leader in his home. That is a land or a people that doesn't fall, right? But so can we think of a people where there's no council, there's no leadership, kind of from the king down? And this we may think when we hear the word council, we automatically think like counseling, but that's not what this is. This would be wisdom, guidance. So, thinking more guidance in terms of like Solomon, right? He's got a lot of wisdom to lead. Yeah. The only example I can think of a people didn't have any wisdom or guidance would be if you looked at the Northern Kingdom and they had rulers, but just not good ones, right? And eventually the lack of leadership, I should say biblical. Now they had some kings who did pretty well in terms of the boundaries of Israel and the peace treaties and the trade. But it says continually in the Bible, like they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so what happens eventually is that the whole northern kingdom just gets taken away by Assyria. So that's the end of a land with a lot of poor leadership, right? I can't think of another like really good example though, where there's literally no counsel. The only thing I could think of would be maybe Proverbs is referring to Judges. Because after Joshua dies, there's really no leader during the time of the judges. You have individual judges, you have also priests and prophets working, but no one's really in charge for a long period of time. And the country Israel doesn't fall in the sense of completely cease to exist, but it falls in terms of morality. Right at the end of the book of Judges, there's just this terrible story, and people are quoted in the scripture in the book of Judges itself saying nothing has ever happened like this. This is as bad as it's ever gotten. So if you're thinking in terms of a spirit of morality, a spirit of truth, there was no counsel during the time of Judges, any like real lasting positive, good counsel. You had some judges that were good, some that were not so good, but they were all kind of short reigns, and they never were none of them were particularly great, right? They were just kind of okay, which is why I think it drives the people at the beginning of the book of Samuel. They're asking for a king. They want like kind of a long-lasting leader, much like the other nations around them. With a monarchy brings a certain amount of what's the word? It lasts longer. It's not kind of these short reigns of judges and things like that. So that would be another example. Maybe you could talk of where there's no counsel, there's no leadership, the people fall. But maybe it's just a hypothetical thought, right? If the country has no leadership, it will fall. There's safety in a multitude of counselors. In other words, this is interesting. You think about it. God gives gifts to many people, right? And so you might get to a position and want to be maybe more valued than you actually are. And the reality is that it's a better thing for the church and for everybody involved that leaders are fairly interchangeable, and that like for example, if a pastor leaves a church, you don't want the church to kind of fold up and fall apart. You would actually rather that church has a certain strength and ability on its own. They don't necessarily need a pastor right away to lead it. In the long term, I'm sure the pastor is not a good situation, but for short periods of time, a church should be able to get by without its pastor. Um, so it is that people are trained, elders are trained, church council leadership is trained. You know, this is good for the church. You don't want to be dependent on one person or be in a situation which is even worse where there's no leadership. That's not a good thing either. But rather, it's better when many people are trained to do a task so that we're fairly interchangeable, so that the situation, the church, the school, the whatever it is, can continue to go forward. That's what's best for the kingdom, right? In other words, it would be good that the church, like according to the fourth, maybe the third commandment, the congregation should respect and love its pastor. But the congregation the congregation should offer love and respect to the pastor, but the pastor should also be interchangeable, right? The church shouldn't fall apart when a pastor takes a call somewhere else. And that would be what's best for everyone who's there, right? Because you wouldn't want everyone who's part of the congregation to go through this terribly traumatic time because a pastor takes a call. That would be a bad situation. So don't know exactly what more to say about that. It seems it's pretty straightforward, but it's also kind of a deep thought. That people are more safe when there's good leadership across the board, not just a very small subset of leadership, but rather a broad subset of leadership. Yeah. Okay. Verse 15. Yerowa, sorry, ki Arab zar vesone tekeim bo te'ah. Um, hmm. Well, we got to look up the surety, right? That's, I think, the big deal here. Let's look this word up here. Okay, take on a pledge. So something like he who takes on a pledge, or he who is a sir who will take on a pledge for a stranger will surely suffer, something like that. But he who hates a pledge is secure. Okay. Whoever puts up a security for a stranger will surely suffer harm, but he who hates striking hands in pledge is secure. This is a really interesting verse here. Okay. Okay, let's look that up. Okay, so the idea here is put up a security for your neighbor. Guaranteeing another's loan in case of default is discouraged. The practice may be motivated by the promise of an easy profit in return for risk. So something to the effect of someone has a debt, right? And you looks like almost the idea of maybe buy the debt, or you would maybe take on their loan. Like so they've got a loan with another person. You'd pay their loan so that you can maybe charge them interest, or it's you're looking at it as an investment. So when you at first glance, this sounds strange because you'd think it would be a good thing to help someone, even a stranger, right? Uh, but the way the thing is set up, usually almost always the second part of the phrase is the positive, or is the response to the question. Um, so I think it's really holding out that someone who hates, in other words, someone who refrains from signing contracts like this is secure, is in the right, it's a good place to be. And it seems like, so maybe you take on this debt because you think you're going to get paid off, but the proverb is saying you're going to suffer, you're going to deal with. So in other words, if a guy hasn't paid off a debt already and you take it on thinking you're going to make some money off of it, you're probably going to end up holding the bag. You know what I mean? It's not going to work out well for you. And the vice versa of this would be, yeah, don't get into those. The Old Testament seems to lay out the idea that it's better to give than to make a loan. If someone's in need, you should just give it to them. The Bible seems to be against loaning money in general, and definitely against charging high interest if you are loaning somebody money. It really seems to, like, scanning in my mind through the variety of places you hear loans, mostly in like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, some in Exodus as well. Talks about loans and how you should, perhaps if you need them, but almost all the time it's always pointing towards it's better if you just give them the money outright, right? Don't do loans. And I think the idea of the borrower is always slave to the lender, and God does not want his people to be slaves, especially after he rescued them from slavery in Egypt. He wants them to be free, and that would mean that as an Israelite person and another Hebrew comes to you, the last thing God wants is for one Hebrew to put another Hebrew in slavery, i.e., in debt to one another, right? So it seems like the Bible's saying here, in general, just stay out of loaning money to one another. If your friend needs help, just help him, right? And it does point a little bit towards the person who's in trouble too. I've been proud and needed help and received help, and wanted to make it a loan. Like, I want to pay you back. And the person who's giving is like, no, that's not how we're doing this. I'm giving you this because I want to help. But we're proud, right? We don't want a handout. We don't want a gift. We want to pay our debts back, which flies in the face of what God has done for us. There is no way you can repay him for what he's done. And if you think that's the case, you're living in fantasy land. So if we can receive a gift from God that we know we can't repay, why are we so reticent to receive gifts at times from real people in our life? Not real people, I'm sorry. That's to insinuate that God's not real. I mean, like, people in our lives, physical people that we greet, and, unlike God, who gives us this kind of thing we sometimes we can't see, we can't tangibly have this idea of forgiveness, but we have it, in body and blood and the gospel and the absolution. But why are we so unwilling to maybe take a gift, maybe a monetary one, or a gift of time, or a gift of advice or wisdom from someone, and we're just incessantly going to pay it back, right? Don't necessarily need to, Sometimes giving of gifts is a good thing. My dad impressed upon me one time when I was a young man. I think it was like 13 or 14. It was confirmation time. And some people from the church were paying me a compliment. Some older person in the congregation gave me a gift. And I wanted to refuse it. Like, oh, it's too much. No, I can't take it. Or well, it's not, they was like, you're such a good singer. I was like, oh, it's, whatever, it's fine. And my dad said, Ryan, sometimes you just need to say thank you. It's not about you and your pride, because people give gifts and they want their gifts to be appreciated. They want to be thanked, right? So sometimes let go of your stinking pride. Just say thank you graciously, and accept a gift that you probably couldn't have gotten for yourself. It's okay. And I've tried to live by that to a certain extent. It's hard at times. I to this day, I'm not a very good compliment taker, especially from like my wife. There's something inside me that when people give compliments, I literally feel awkward. Like I just don't feel comfortable taking compliments. But you need to. People don't say things like that because they don't want to. They do want to. They want to show love. And so when they show love, you got to receive that love. You got to receive it graciously. So we've talked about a lot, and we haven't covered very verses. That's okay. I'm going to cut it off here. We're at 46 minutes. I think it's a good place to stop. I'll just mark it on my sheet and keep track of where we're at. We'll start here next time. So Lord's blessings to you this day, this Easter Monday. We live in the glory and the glory of the resurrection of Jesus, the reality that he is risen, and because he is risen, we will rise from the dead as well. Lord's blessings to you this beautiful Monday.